Alright guys, happy Wednesday. Here we are on our day 3 of digital learning. I hope you guys are enjoying getting to do your schoolwork from home. Here's today's lecture on civil liberties. I hope you guys watched the Bill of Rights one. According to YouTube, only like 2 of you did. So please come back and watch those lectures. You need to hear my voice. We need to get through this. But anyway, today I'm going to be lecturing on civil liberties. This is a short slideshow, but it's very dense. And I highly recommend that you go watch the videos I've posted under the resources for today. I would have had them in the PowerPoint for you to watch, but I kind of separated them because I'm doing this little lecture thing. So please go watch those. Okay? Alright, so civil liberties are protections against government. It protects the American people from, I guess you'd say, the government being too involved in their life, from restricting those natural rights that the philosophers talked about. And so that's what civil liberties are. This is where we're really going to focus in on the First Amendment. The civil liberties we'll talk about today all come from that First Amendment. Okay, so civil liberties guarantee the protection of persons and property from arbitrary acts of government. Okay, arbitrary just means random or personal acts that do not have any reason or system. It prevents the government from just like saying, hey, you can't exercise freedom of speech, but someone else can. And so things like that. The government must be fair and equal to all, according to civil liberties. And just some examples are freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of press, and guarantee of a fair trial. So there's some in there from the other amendments. If you look at my picture over on the right, the freedom to bear arms is there. But today with civil liberties, we're really just going to be focusing in on that First Amendment. Okay, so First Amendment. Trying to fix my screen. There we go. Alright, so the First Amendment is the amendment that protects our civil liberties. Even though there's some others mixed in with the other amendments, the First Amendment is really the one that just protects our civil liberties. And there's 3 parts to that First Amendment: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom of the press. Okay, and then I posted the text there of the amendment so you can read it. Though I think you guys have already been reading the Bill of Rights, so I'm not going to stop and read it to you. Just know that the First Amendment is our amendment that protects our civil liberties. Okay, the first one of those is freedom of speech. Okay, freedom of speech is the right to express ideas without government restraint. I told you guys yesterday in the Bill of Rights presentation we'd be talking about this one a little bit more. The right to express ideas without government restraint. The government can't stop you from sharing your opinion, except in a couple of examples, which I'll get to here in just a minute. Freedom of speech is a democratic idea that dates back to ancient Greece. In addition to ancient Greeks developing democracy, they also developed the idea of freedom of speech. So democracy and freedom of speech have been together for a long time, since they were first created in ancient Greece. So according to freedom of speech, people can express an opinion, even an unpopular one, without fear of the government. And we see people do this a lot, and we see people get offended by the things that people share. But according to the First Amendment, people can express their opinion, even that unpopular one, without fear of the government, unless it is doing something that causes harm or encourages violence or something like that. So it protects all forms of communication, including speech, art, and other forms of media. The freedom of speech has changed over time. It includes things like Facebook posts and things you put on Instagram. Guys, freedom of speech protects the images that you post online as well. That's all under freedom of speech. It also protects this idea of symbolic speech, which is just an action that expresses an idea. I'm sure you guys have heard the phrase, sometimes actions speak louder than words. That's also protected by freedom of speech. And just one example of that symbolic speech is flag burning, people who burn the American flag in protest. The first time this came up in court, I believe the person who burned the flag was burning it in protest of President Reagan. But don't hold me to that, look that up on your own. And like I've been saying all along, not all speech is protected by the First Amendment. Some examples include plagiarism, threats, or words that encourage people to engage in illegal activity. Now, this is a little bit different. It's not like peer pressure, like so one of your classmates encouraging you to test out a vape. That's not what we mean by words that encourage people to engage in illegal activity. That's words like what was being passed around on Facebook for people to storm the Pentagon, not the Pentagon, Area 51. I guess that was a year or two ago. That's one of those types of freedom of speech that's not protected under freedom of speech, type of speech that's not protected by freedom of speech. Okay. The next one is freedom of religion. This prohibits the government from creating a law that establishes a national religion, and the government also cannot stop free exercise of religion, which just means that they cannot stop you from practicing whatever religion you choose or from choosing not to practice. Definitely in the modern day that we live in, lots of people choose not to practice. And the government can't stop you from doing that, from making that choice. And though the First Amendment enforces the separation of church and state, it does not mean that religion is not present in public life. Okay? People don't hide their religion behind closed doors. People can be very vocal about it, and according to the First Amendment, freedom of speech, they can be vocal about their religion. So even though we've got this separation of church and state, even though government doesn't cross lines with religion, religion is not closed off from public life. And so the 14th Amendment kind of extended religious freedom by preventing states from enacting laws that would advance or inhibit any one religion. Up until the 14th Amendment, it was just at the national level they couldn't do that, but that changes after the passing of the 14th Amendment. Now, with the freedom of religion, our government has been very inconsistent in upholding what it says in the First Amendment. And I say that down there at the bottom, the Supreme Court has been inconsistent with its ruling on religious freedom. Guys, think through the Pledge of Allegiance. The Pledge of Allegiance has one nation under God in it. That's kind of against the idea of freedom of religion, because you can choose not to practice, but then the pledge to your nation. You can be patriotic without being religious. So there's just kind of contingents here. One example is in 2005, the Supreme Court ruled in one case that it was constitutional to display the Ten Commandments in a public place in Texas, but then they later ruled that it was unconstitutional in Kentucky. So it's important for you to know that our government has been very inconsistent with its rulings on religious freedom and upholding freedom of religion. Okay, and so then that last part is freedom of the press. Freedom of the press is the right to report news or circulate opinion without censorship from the government. Okay, this kind of goes along with freedom of speech because it's that expression of ideas. Freedom of the press is just, it's printed material. It's the printed newspaper, the newspaper that shows up online, media coverage like Fox 5, if you guys have been watching the news. So freedom of the press is just the right to report what's going on without censorship from the government. Lots of countries out there censor what's shown on TV. So freedom of the press originated in the Virginia Declaration of Rights. If you guys remember talking about that, that's where this idea originated. Over time, people have questioned freedom of the press, even though it's something that we have and something that is respected. Some people have come to question media rights when it comes to cases of national security, and that's because of things that have happened like the Pentagon Papers in 1971. So what you need to understand about the Pentagon Papers, and that's what your activity's on today. So I encourage you to go watch the video on the Pentagon Papers, look up a little information about it. But what happened here was the government kept records of what was going on with the U.S. involvement in Vietnam, and they became known as the Pentagon Papers. And they were leaked to the press. These government documents were leaked, and they were published in the New York Times in 1791. And what the public found out reading the Pentagon Papers is that America was a lot more involved in the war in Vietnam than media had been sharing with them, because the media didn't know. The government was keeping it under taps. And this is towards the end of that conflict. This is when people are protesting. They don't understand why we're in this war that doesn't even have anything to do with our country. And so it just kind of angered people. And the government fought back, and they tried to convict the guy who leaked the papers. And so it just kind of led to this whole debate that's been going on for a couple of decades now, on media rights when it comes to things such as national security. So just an interesting case here. I would encourage you to look up more about it. But the last thing you need to know with freedom of the press is in 2017, the U.S. ranked 37 out of 199 countries and territories that have press freedom. So we're up there, not as high up as I think we believe we are, with how we allow press freedom in our country. And then just some examples of countries that have absolutely no press freedom: Cuba, Iran, North Korea, Syria. Russia probably still has an absence of press freedom. I know for sure they didn't have any when they were the USSR. So freedom of press, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, things that we take for granted, things that we don't even really understand within our own country, in some cases, but these are all our civil liberties, our natural born rights, as John Locke would have said, and things that we hold very dearly, and it's important that our government protects under the First Amendment. So I believe that's the end of today's lecture. For today, you've got the Pentagon paper reading, and it's not required, but I highly, highly recommend that you go watch the resource videos from today. Because, like I said, if I wasn't doing the lecture this way, I would definitely be having you guys watch them. I think that'll really help you understand civil liberties before we get where we're going tomorrow. So I'll talk to you guys soon. Please reach out if you have any questions. And I hope y'all are having a great week.